Also today, Russia says it will give Washington proof that a Ukrainian drone targeted one of Vladimir Putin's residences before being downed on Monday. Ukraine has denied any such move. Angela Diffley is our foreign editor. She's with me and she's been looking into this story. Angela, first of all then, so what is the latest on these allegations that Putin's residence was targeted by Ukraine?
Yes, so these allegations on Monday, and President Trump originally, when he was questioned about them, he said, oh, yes, I heard about them from Putin himself. I'm very angry. Later, he posted on Truth Social and appeared to be, or he reposted something, appeared to be much more sceptical. It does seem implausible because normally there would be a lot of sound, a lot of background evidence of this, and nobody has been able to produce any, and none of the intelligence services of the various people who operate in that area have been able to come up with any evidence either. And Volodymyr Zelenskyy is quite clear. He says the Russians are simply peddling lies to use this as a pretext not to go further in any negotiations, to derail the peace process, and to say we would have been very keen to move this thing forward, but in the light of what's happened, we now have to review our negotiating position, which of course is what they've said. So we'll see what the Russians come up with. As they say, they have evidence which they will present to Washington. Interesting that they are only presenting it to Washington. We'll see where that goes.
All right, and last night we had both Vladimir Putin and Vladimir Zelenskyy addressing their people in New Year's Eve speeches. Let's start with Zelenskyy. What did he say?
Yes, so he said, as he's been saying in recent days, that peace negotiations are, close to achieving something, 90% there, but that the 10%, of course, is crucial. And he said on that 10% depends the fate of peace, the fate of Ukraine, and the fate of Europe. And he said Ukraine does not want peace at any price. And above all, they must be sure of concrete security guarantees, because, of course, what we've been hearing after that Florida meeting with Trump was a vague assurance that for 15 years there would be a NATO-style security assurance that if Ukraine were attacked, then its allies, including notably the US, would come to its rescue. But, clearly Zelenskyy feels he cannot trust Donald Trump, cannot trust allies. He needs something much more concrete, and that is still his position. He faces another year of negotiating this very tricky triangle with Trump and Putin, with Trump blowing hot and cold, and Zelenskyy trying to find the best way to try to persuade Trump of his case. It's a difficult year. He himself has been slightly undermined, not least by Donald Trump saying he is an illegitimate president because he is avoiding elections, which, of course, entirely fails to take into account the fact that, a country at war cannot hold elections. But all of this, the corruption scandal in Ukraine, has made things a little bit more difficult for Zelenskyy. This war is taking its toll, and he has to show on the battlefield to the Europeans and to the Americans that Ukraine can win.
OK, so Zelenskyy says, look, they're 90% there with a deal. A similar message from Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, Putin said he congratulated his troops and said, we offer them all our support. And he said, we believe in you. We believe in our victory. Of course, in Russia, this is still called a special operation, not a war. And even though for Ukraine they are facing some problems with conscription, Russia has 146 million population. They have a vast number of soldiers from which they can draw. And so even though polls suggest, and of course it's very difficult with polls in Russia, it's not a democracy by any means, and so it's difficult to know exactly what the feeling is. But there is some suggestion that people are wondering what this war is all about. He will increasingly be framing it as defending Russia from NATO. And I think we can expect this year more and more intervention from Russia online trying to stoke division within Europe, within European allies, simply to try to wear Europe down and to wear down support for Ukraine. That is a key element, I think, of what we can expect from the Russians in this. Otherwise, he pledged support to the troops and said, we believe in you and we believe in victory. It was pretty upbeat.
All right. Thank you very much. Angela Diffley for us there.